On the broadcast tonight, fraud charges on Wall Street. The government is making the case tonight against a big name. What will it mean for everybody hit by the recession? Nowhere fast. Air travel is crippled. Hundreds of thousands could be stranded again as that huge cloud of ash spreads across the sky. What happens when volcanic ash goes anywhere near a jet engine, and why is it so dangerous? And making a difference for Haiti, an American doctor on her mission to save a hospital that could just have hours to live. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Some people will hear our lead story here tonight and come away believing there are bankers who treat the U.S. economy like a game, or as some have said, like a casino. While some get rich, others get hurt. Tonight, a big, powerful Wall Street investment bank, Goldman Sachs, is accused of fraud. That's a big charge, and here's why. If the government is right, people all across the country are still paying the price for schemes like this that we're only learning about now, after the damage has been done. We have this all covered tonight. We start with a guy who's been covering this for a long time, Dylan Ratigan from CNBC. And Dylan, what happened today, and what do we learn about our system?
What happened today was the revelation that inside of this giant too big to fail banking system, that there are some individuals that may be creating fraudulent bonds, securities, stocks, investment vehicles, selling them to pensioners, and then betting they will collapse. We all have to care about this because these schemes and scams are being run at the expense of all of our retirees, all of our middle-class taxpayers, and all of our students.
All right, we're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to get the story in chief from Lisa Myers in our Washington newsroom, who spent the day covering just what is alleged to have happened here. Lisa, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. This comes as welcome news to those who have long claimed that Wall Street knowingly sold junk products, which generated massive losses and helped trigger the recession. Essentially, Goldman Sachs is accused of helping rig the game against investors. In a civil complaint, the SEC accused the firm and one of its vice presidents of knowingly defrauding investors.
Anytime a storied firm like Goldman Sachs, which has one of the finest reputations on Wall Street, is charged with fraud by the U.S. government, it's an important moment, not just for that firm, but for the financial system.
Here's what the SEC is charging: that Goldman worked with a prominent hedge fund, which handles largely unregulated investments for the wealthy, to create a package of risky subprime mortgages that was designed to fail. The hedge fund, Paulson & Company, is owned by billionaire John Paulson, who is not related to former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson. John Paulson himself made an estimated $3.7 billion in 2007, largely by betting against the subprime market. He and his firm are not accused of wrongdoing. Here's what the SEC claimed happened. Goldman Sachs was pulling together a bucket of subprime mortgages to sell to investors. It allowed the hedge fund to pick the worst mortgages to go into the bucket, which means the investment was likely to fail. Goldman Sachs then helped the hedge fund bet against the bucket. Goldman Sachs then labeled the bucket a good investment and sold the supposedly good investment to others, telling them the hedge fund also had invested. But Goldman Sachs did not tell other investors that the hedge fund helped pick the worst mortgages and was actually betting against the bucket. When the bucket failed, investors lost more than $1 billion. The hedge fund made $1 billion. Goldman earned $15 million in fees. Some see the charges as hopeful evidence of a new, more aggressive SEC.
The style at the SEC has changed. They're harder, they're tougher, and they're going to let all the evidence hang out.
Goldman Sachs denied the charges, saying they are completely unfounded in law and fact, and that the firm will vigorously contest them and defend its reputation. Goldman also says it lost $90 million on the deal. One former prosecutor came to Goldman's defense.
I don't think that there is fraud here. I think at the end of the day, Goldman will be vindicated.
Could the SEC investigation lead to charges against other firms?
We will look at deals with similar profiles or any deal where disclosures were not properly made.
Experts say the charges are likely to fuel populist anger with Wall Street.
The public has great discontent about executive compensation and is now going to wonder about the basic integrity of this marketplace.
This also could fuel anti-Wall Street sentiment on Capitol Hill, where the Senate is about to begin a high-stakes battle, Brian, over how to reform the system and reduce risky practices.
All right, Lisa Myers with the background tonight from our Washington newsroom. We should also point out, rough day on Wall Street for Goldman Sachs. The stock had its biggest one-day loss ever, finishing down more than $23 a share, almost 13% of its value. The Dow, by the way, which has been moving steadily higher for 7 straight weeks, took a hit, down just under 126 points. Dylan Radigan remains with us here in the studio. You have talked about this every afternoon on MSNBC. You devoted most of your show to it again today. First of all, we should make clear it's okay to bet against the economy. It's okay to bet just as you buy a stock hoping it'll rise, one you think is going to fall. Who got hurt today?
The people that got hurt today were the people that were the buyers of those investments. And much like, again, if you're buying anything, if I'm buying a meal from you, I want to know that the meal is actually nourishing for me when I give you money, that you're not selling me a poison meal and betting that I'm going to die. That is exactly what was going on with these bonds. So the basic investors get hurt, which makes it sound like, that's a money game between guys in New York and D.C. It doesn't really affect me, which I honestly wish that was the case. The problem is the investors who are getting hit are the pension fund managers for the teachers, police, judges, and civil servants that work inside of this country, making matters worse. Regardless of whether Goldman Sachs is guilty of fraud, the government policy supporting this version of our banking system is happening at the direct expense of every retiree in the form of no return for fixed income investors, 1%, 0% yield. Ask anybody who's on a fixed income, they will tell you they're not getting any money. Middle class taxpayers who have watched their homes go underwater as a result of these types of schemes, and their tax dollars used through AIG to pay off Goldman Sachs and those they are betting with. And then the students of this country who suffer from the largest unemployment. 25% of those under 25 do not have work. That is where the unemployment hit is. So while the bankers and the speculators get the support that they do, our students, middle-class taxpayers, and retirees are paying the price today and every day, Brian.
That's why it's such a big story tonight. Dylan Radigan from MSNBC, thank you for stopping by tonight. Now to the other major story we've been following. Mother Nature reminding all of us this is her planet, not ours. She still runs things. We just think we are masters of the skies. A volcano has paralyzed air travel. You still can't fly to London or Paris from the United States. Europeans can't fly to other cities within Europe. President Obama may not be able to take Air Force One to a funeral in Poland this weekend. Our coverage starts tonight with NBC's Donna Friesen at London's still quiet Heathrow Airport tonight. Donna, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. What was a bad situation just got worse through the course of today and tonight. Much of Europe remains a no-fly zone. The only ones cleared for takeoff at Britain's East Midlands Airport today were the maintenance crews. Now worry about the paint drying on these runways. They're deserted. Virtually nothing is flying in Northern Europe, but further south, Italian and Mediterranean airspace is still jam-packed. As the cloud of volcanic ash slowly spreads south and southeast, more countries became no-fly zones today, from Britain, where planes were grounded for a second day, and across northern and central Europe to the edge of Russia. No flights in 11 countries and limited takeoffs and landings in at least 6 others. 17,000 flights were canceled across Europe, and no one's sure when the skies will clear.
It is reasonable to assume that there will be some significant disruption of European air traffic tomorrow.
Hundreds of thousands of passengers are stranded, some stoically waiting, hoping, and napping wherever they can.
We'd like to get over to Poland, but it may not be possible today. But you go with the flow.
These stranded Belgians certainly were. Airport hotels are overflowing, trains are facing unprecedented demand, the Eurostar is fully booked until Monday, and ferries are turning passengers away. The U.S. military has closed down operations at 4 U.S. air bases in Europe, including Germany's Ramstein. In Poland, plans are going ahead for the funeral of the country's president on Sunday, though if the airspace remains closed, many dignitaries may miss it, including President Obama. Over in Denmark, they didn't let a volcano spoil a party. Denmark's queen went ahead with her lavish 70th birthday, even though many, including Prince Philip, couldn't make it. At Britain's Bristol airport, the runways were open to runners, dogs, even kites. At least something was flying.
And when will things get back to normal? Well, no one is predicting. The situation is constantly being reassessed, and it was announced tonight that the airspace over England will remain closed until 1 o'clock tomorrow, though that may well be extended. Brian?
Donna Friesen starting off our coverage at London Heathrow tonight. Donna, thanks. And then there are the people who are living in the shadow of this massive cloud of volcanic ash. Our own Chris Jansing has made her way to Iceland and has more literally on the fallout there. Chris, good evening, and we should point out you were able to get there by flying in behind the winds from the west where the incoming air is clear.
That's exactly right. There have been no air disruptions here, Brian, because the two airports in Iceland are to the west and that plume of ash is moving east. Still, there is a lot of concern, and that's because if history is a guide, the eruption of another far more powerful volcano could be next. On his remote farm in southwest Iceland, Thorkel Eriksson was taking care of two newly born lambs when he heard a terrifying sound.
When I heard this unbelievably big sound, really deep roaring sound. It was just like a Concorde was crashing here.
The volcano erupted less than 2 miles from his barn. The lava burst